Once again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking time off from your busy schedule to spend some time on this webinar. My name is Angel Chin. I'm the Field Marketing Manager for BlackBerry Cylance. I would like to introduce Rob Collins, who is our APAC Director for Pre-Sales System Engineer. He is leading the whole pre-sales team in APAC. He has more than 15 years of experience in cybersecurity industry. And prior to joining us, he has worked with several Tier 1 security vendors. He also had the opportunity working with some of the end users and within the end user market heading up the APAC infrastructures and information security for a large pharmaceutical company in Singapore.
Thanks, Angel. So just before I go on, there is a safe harbor clause coming out in the near future, but to it. It's a roadmap, it's not a promise. So today's topic, better security and fewer resources. And I was thinking before the webinar, what are the resources available to a business? When you think about things like the time of your staff, the employees, the bandwidth that's available to you as a business, your IT stuff, security and resources, and even the system resources, how much memory and CPU is available on each system that you have available to you. So these are some of the resources that certainly we take into consideration as part of this. And being able to improve security while also using fewer resources is going to be a win-win type scenario. You are reducing your risk and hopefully using fewer resources that can be then used for other parts of your business. Now, certainly we are seeing that cyber attacks are massively on the increase, and so is the sophistication that we're seeing behind them as well. Ransomware has moved on from your standard spray and pray type attack to now using much more sophisticated techniques where they will get a foothold in your environment, typically through a weaponized Word document. Once in, they will work their way around looking for essentially the crown jewels of your business, your main databases, and run the encryption and the ransomware software against that and demand a much higher ransom. In addition, we're still seeing some 300,000 new malware samples coming out a day, 3,000 new websites every second. So these are things that are very difficult to keep up with. And so what we're seeing now is that businesses are starting to come across some challenges with their cybersecurity environment. So certainly they are resource constrained. It could just be that there's not enough staff, not enough budget, and so on. And certainly there's a lack of cybersecurity expertise out there. I meet some of the kids coming out of university that have done a cybersecurity course, and I realize they still have so much to learn. And the only way you can do that is in a real environment. Budgets, we spent a bit of time in healthcare recently where we can see the results of a limited budget that's been assigned to cybersecurity. In a hospital, they can spend money on a nice big fancy X-ray machine and have a politician come out and cut the tape on it. But at the same time, they're running firewalls from 20 years ago. And what we're seeing is that if the hospital can't use their fancy new X-ray machine because they can't check in patients, then it's all gone to waste. So it's fine or help customers to spend their budgets on the security stack a little smarter. We're talking about very complex security measures in place. As we've added more and more layers of security to our technology stack over the years, we're finding it's getting more and more complex to manage more noise and more logs and more policies and more tools. And what that's doing is obviously slowing down system performance for the end. It's a common complaint now that users finding that the security stack on their endpoints is really slowing it down. If they have enough weight in the business, they'll just uninstall it. We see that happening time and again. And quite often these are critical research devices or really important servers where even Microsoft has said, oh, we don't recommend having antivirus on servers. I disagree. That's where all the good stuff is. gotten to where we are today, essentially because the very core technology of security in the past has been signature-based antivirus. And that hasn't worked for a long time. It's too slow, it doesn't keep up. And ultimately, there are infinite ways to package up a single piece of malware, and there's infinite ways to write malware. So when you're writing signatures to try and cover a scenario of infinity times infinity, you're never going to catch up or get in front. And so all the security vendors have been adding more and more layers of security on top of their signature-based antivirus, and adding technology to create the signatures faster so that they can try and protect you better. And so we've seen at present now, we have things like host intrusion prevention systems, sandboxing, isolation technologies, endpoint detect and response, and then on top of that we have heuristics and host-based firewalls, web reputation, URL filtering, application whitelisting, and data loss prevention. So if this all sounds like technology that you have and you're managing, then what you need is a lot of specialized humans, and that's a lot of weight on the endpoint resources. And all of those technologies are still reactive. A sandbox, you can run malware in a sandbox. It takes 5 minutes to work out that it is malware. By which time, if the user's already got the sample, they've already run it, they've already ransomed their machine. So it's good that it's only 5 minutes, but it's still 5 minutes too long. Web reputation, when you're adding 3,000 new websites every second, how can you know the reputation of every single one? So we at Cylance have taken a totally different approach to the core problem of detecting malware. So we've taken an antivirus approach using machine learning, artificial intelligence. So we've essentially taught our system to recognize what malware looks like. And so we achieve, just through our single core technology, a 99.7% detection rate without the necessary requirement for all of these extra layers of security. So this has a lot of flow-on benefits. So certainly what we've seen with CPU utilization tends to be anywhere around 50 to 70%. I've seen systems that are running their daily background scan running at 100% CPU utilization, memory running up beyond 250 meg, sometimes 500 meg. And so that really becomes a noticeable impact for the end users. You'll see that they start timing their lunch breaks around scans. They'll turn their computer on, then go get a cup of coffee while they wait for it to boot up because it takes so long. With next-gen technologies like Cylance, you'll see CPU utilization tends to be much, much lower. Memory utilization, much, much lower. Our mathematical algorithm is around about 100 megabytes. Our detection technology takes 50 milliseconds. And because we're only scanning either very low priority passive in the background or as you open a file, we're not constantly looking at everything on your disk and running background scans all the time. There's just no need for it anymore. Twice, I think, in the last week, I've heard customers tell me that they've had legacy antivirus and Cylance running side by side. When they've uninstalled their legacy antivirus, something very interesting happens. Users call the help desk and say thank you. We've had customers tell us that time and time again. And these are usually the hard to please users, developers and so on, people that have never wanted antivirus on their machines. Once they've had Cylance installed, they tend to be quite happy. And so, yeah, they say thank you for getting rid of that old junk that was slowing my machine down. So we're focused on simple deploys. We make sure that we've tried to stay out of the kernel as much as possible, which doesn't require any reboots. So we're a simple MSI package that's deployed out. It just starts to work straight away. Again, low impact, and that can all be done silently without the user even noticing and without any kind of reboots. We want to be silent. That's the name of our company. We don't want the end user to even care about what's happening on their endpoints for security. In terms of easy to manage, you'll find policy-wise, and I'll run through this in a demo, typically we're 2 or 3 checkboxes away from protecting your environment. I've seen other solutions where you need to pick, excuse me, you pick a number between 1 and 9, 1 being a trade-off with lots of false positives, and 9 being a trade-off with nothing being detected, and you have to pick a number between 1 and 9 and hope for the best. And as far as cost effectiveness goes, we really focus on not using too much endpoint resource. So you'll find you can get more life out of your hardware fleet, you get more battery life, and so on. So let me run through a couple of demos and other things to look at here. So the first one I wanted to show was in Task Manager, the services that we have running. We have only these 3 services. So the Cylance native agent itself, you can see is running at 85 meg at the moment, 0% CPU, sorry, 0.4% CPU. It's really not doing anything at all at the moment. And then Optics, which is our endpoint detect and response product, running at another 80 meg. Now these are being combined into a single service with the next release. And so we expect to save somewhere around 40 to 60 megs of memory just by combining those into a single service. The actual Protect agent is just the icon, and so that can even be turned off if you don't need to display that to the users. In terms of policy, we really focus on trying to make this as easy as possible. If you're having to configure lots of policies, maintain lots of policies, it's quite a tedious task for the IT staff to look after. And so we've really designed this to be as simple as possible. And again, there's some simplification even going further in the product, where if you enable auto quarantine with execution control, or what we call our unsafe and abnormal documents, your environment's effectively protected against malware. For memory protection, if you enable the memory protection with the blocking action, you are then protected against exploits. And with script control, once that's enabled and blocked, you are able to prevent scripts from running. The caveat with that is that you still need to allow approved scripts to run. So you can approve a script either through adding a folder exclusion, adding a hash of the script into the product after it's been detected in alert mode, or you can also sign your scripts, which is highly recommended, and add the certificate that you use to sign the scripts in the certificate area. So most customers end up with roughly 4, 5, 6 policies at most, and so we try and keep that nice and simple as far as that part of the product goes. Now, another IT saving measure that we've introduced with our endpoint detect and response side of things, we were heavily focused on coming up with a better way to do endpoint detect and response. And so we've made sure that we're trying to save bandwidth by very much keeping the data collection on the endpoint and sending relevant metadata up to the cloud as required. And so with Optics and Protect together, they typically use about 3 megabytes per day. So they're very lean in terms of their bandwidth usage. We're not constantly streaming things up to the cloud and doing correlation analysis there. We do the correlation analysis on the endpoint and then stream things up as required. And it's just the metadata that comes through. We've also focused on automating as much as possible. So if you can automate a lot of your security functions, then again, you can save on your staff's time. So we have the ability to not just detect, but our response is a very proactive mechanism. Here, for example, a Java remote access Trojan, you could terminate the process tree associated with that. So if there are any Java remote access Trojans detected on the endpoint, we can terminate that immediately. If you can detect, why respond when you can respond with a full blocking action? So that's our methodology. Why wait for something to run and then try and roll it back or shut it down somehow if we can stop it from working in the first place? Again, that comes down to automation, being able to stop as much as possible up front. Now, beyond that, we have this concept of playbooks. Now, a playbook can be any kind of Python package you could think of. You can deploy that to your optics agent and it will run. Now, we have some built into the tool to collect forensic information. So we get information such as browser history, registry hives, master file tables, event logs, and so on. Now, we've Cylance's incident response, and we know that collecting that information can be quite tedious and difficult when it has to be done manually, deploying a lot of scripts after the fact. In this particular case, simply by running the detection rule with the response and the playbook, I can shut down a Java remote access Trojan and also collect information relevant to how it got onto the end user's device in the first place. Now, that information can be stored in an S3 bucket, SFTP server, SMB file share, or even stored locally. So this whole automated process of detecting, responding, forensic information collection, and shutting down and containing the threat can really save tremendous amounts of time and let you focus on what's important. So if there's any questions on this, pop them into the chat window and I can come back to this as well if we need to. Something else we have within the optics area is the focus data. So even though we've automated our ability to detect and quarantine malware, it's still nice to be able to go into a tool and see exactly how something came to be. So again, this information, our focus data, it's automatically collected at the endpoint. If there is any kind of detection event, the information is uploaded to the cloud for us to review. And so here I have an actual malware quarantining event, the file called convincingly.exe. So Cylance Protect has done its job. It's stopped it, it's quarantined it, which is great. How did it get there? Well, if we look at the previous detection here, we have a Word document called QuickBooks Expense Report copy.doc. And so we know that this is a popular way to get a foothold in a customer's environment. Is simply emailing a document, some social engineering, tricking the user into running a macro. The macros tend to download the malicious code, whether that's something like a Emotet or a Cobalt Strike type of backdoor is pretty common. So how did the Word document get there? If we go back a little further in time, we start seeing Outlook appearing. And here I can even see Outlook has opened up WinWord, and it's come from an email with the subject fishhandsator.eml. So this is all a staged demo. And typically, if script control is running, it wouldn't have even gotten as far as being able to download the malware. But it's good to have that as a backup. Now, if you're running any kind of a SOAR type solution at the moment as well, so this is where we're starting to see the market moving a little bit. Things like tools like Splunk, Phantom, and Demisto, and so on. We have full API capability, and we've got certain integrations available as well. So we can go next level with the automation, where if Cylance is detecting malware on the endpoint that's managed to get through a mail security solution, a web security solution, or a firewall, you can automate a lot of this so that the hashes are then passed to the gateway type devices to not allow them through again. Or if we're seeing the IP address of a command and control, we can again add that to the firewall to make sure that that IP address is shut down and the command and control is broken. So you'll see with the ability to integrate, we have all of our API available, and we have also fairly robust demonstrations with certain tools like Splunk, Logarithm, and so on. So If that's something you've been looking at, you can have a chat to us about it. We've got some out-of-the-box packages available for those as well. But certainly for a tool like Phantom, for example, I believe we have something like 16 different types of integrations available. Presentation, and then I'll run through the question side of things. There's some good questions that have come up. So our approach is to provide maximum security, but to do that without inhibiting performance. And so machine learning, it's really just maths. Your computer is a great calculator, and so we're able to do that with using the resources that are available. Cost savings and other strategic benefits. Again, we hear of customers that used to be rebuilding machines constantly. User would always complain that their machine wasn't available, they couldn't do their work. Someone has to rebuild the machine as well. So the cost of rebuilding a machine can work out to be thousands of dollars. If you're not having to do that anymore, there are certainly some benefits to that. If you're not worried about daily scans and daily DAT files and weekly scanning and all the silly metrics associated with antivirus with signatures, and you don't have to worry, and someone doesn't have to worry about maintaining that, you can make life more interesting for your cybersecurity staff. You can have them using more advanced tools like optics to do threat hunting and package deliveries. And so and you might even need less resources entirely. Certainly we try and be as unintrusive as possible. So we can run almost completely silent with no notifications for the end users, no reboots, and certainly no reboots if we detect malware, which I've seen in other solutions, which makes no sense to me. And we can automate as much as possible. We automate the auto quarantining. We can automate shutting down other types of advanced threats. We can automate forensic package and forensic data collection. We can also automate with other upstream security devices and firewalls and mail security solutions and so on. So there's a lot we can do to make our lives easier at this stage. So I'll run through some of the questions. So the first one I have, can we automate the reports, send them through monthly or by email? So let me jump into the system, because there is one little trick that most people don't know. If you come up here, the main account area, and what you'll find is that there is a section here to have email notifications sent to you upon detections of quarantine and unsafe threats. So we can automate at least the alerting side of the tool. Otherwise, you'll find within the reports area, they're generally available on demand only at the moment, but certainly we have it on our roadmap for the very near future. So we're talking sort of in the next 3 months or so, to be able to offer the reports here as a daily or monthly or as required type automated report. So yeah, it's been around for a while, that request, so it's certainly coming. So thanks for that question. Integrations with N-Central, I have to get back to you on that one. I'm not totally familiar with that product, but if N-Central supports APIs, then certainly we'd be able to do some sort of integration with it. Integrating a Cylance dashboard with SharePoint, it's possible. We do have the ability to extract the threat data on a regular basis from the tool and have that brought in. I know we did that ourselves internally from the threat token side of things. So this threat token area, you can use that to extract information on a regular basis and have that presented in other reports. It's just a simple URL with the threat data token on the end of it. So best practices, someone's asked about best practices for Windows workstations and another for Windows servers. So let me run through. The only difference I ever have between the two, because the nice thing is we are very lightweight. We were troubleshooting a problem this morning with a customer that suspected Cylance was causing some issues, but he completely uninstalls and the issues remained. After he'd executed Windows updates and updated his Windows box, suddenly all the problems went away. So I don't come across any issues with performance with us on servers, so there's no reason why you wouldn't run it. So I typically have auto quarantine enabled for both servers and desktops. I like to have the auto upload capability enabled wherever possible. This uploads executable files to our cloud for a further analysis, such as a sandbox. The only difference I ever have on servers is I turn off the watch for new files capability. So we turn that one off simply because the watch for new files feature, it's just looking at anything that's new on disk or changed, and servers tend to run up quite large and dynamic log files. And so if we're constantly scanning a 3 gig exchange log over and over again because it keeps having a new line added to it, that can impact performance on servers. So I usually leave that one turned off. The background scan is fine. We'll check the file once, but not constantly over and over again. If anyone tries to execute malware on a server, or if anyone tries to remotely execute anything, the auto quarantine with execution control will still pick up that malware. There's a question around the bandwidth consumption running updates. And so we have a mechanism within the update facility. We try and limit it down to only a certain number of agents getting the update at any point in time. Typically, an agent update is around 20 to 30 megabytes, so they're not huge, in fact, about the same size as the DAT file. But you'll notice we don't do a lot of updates. So we have an update from July and then a couple in September. So you're looking at roughly one update every sort of 2 months or so. So we don't generally need to do a lot of updating. So the bandwidth requirements around updates are quite manageable. If you do have really, really small bandwidths or satellite links or other types of low connections, we do offer a solution called Hybrid, which can act as something like a proxy for Cylance agents. It takes the agent, updates and distributes them locally if required. You can also ask our support team to limit the number of agents that can be simultaneously updated. So if you open a ticket and say, I want only 20 devices at a time to be updated, they can set that in the system for you. Someone's asked about the installation process, and so we again try and make that fairly simple. We have it pretty well documented. So here we have installation packages for Protect, which are available as executables or MSI packages for Mac and also for our various Linux flavors. There's the optics packages, and then we also have a combined installer where we make both the Protect and optics packages available in a single installer. It does come as an executable, so you do need to be a little bit more careful with your SCCM deployment, because it's they usually look for MSI packages, but these ones are EXEs. There's a question around Cylance Protect and Optics becoming a single service. Does this mean it's going to be a single license? No, there'll still be two separate licenses. It's just the technology will work a little differently on the back end. It's just to try and save some resources, but where the single agent will be able to have licensable features. So Protect and Optics are the first two licensable features, and we'll be bringing Cylance Persona into that same agent at some point in the future. There's a question around legacy product support. So we do actually go all the way back to Windows XP and Server 2003. The requirements are you need .NET Framework 3.51, I believe, because that was the .NET Framework that introduced TLS to Windows and SHA-256 based certificates. So as a minimum security level, we need those on those devices. But yeah, we do go back all the way to XP and Server 2003, and we still support even 32-bit versions of Windows 10, which I didn't know existed until just recently. So there's a question around removing other AV solutions remotely. So we can do that. Our Threat Zero team have optics packages that can uninstall legacy antivirus if required. In fact, that's typically part of our Threat Zero service, is deploying the Cylance agents and then also removing legacy if that's part of the service. All right, so that's the last of the questions that I can see. If there's any more, give you another few seconds to type one in. Oh, managing licenses. Yeah, okay, that's a good question. So it's probably more of a hygiene type question. So what can happen with our solution is if you upgrade a machine or you re-image it, what can happen is quite often with as a duplicate. So it will have the same name, but only one of them will be the live one. So typically wherever you have a duplicate device, what you can do is look for, if one of them is online and one of them is offline, you can remove the offline one. If there are multiple offline devices, just find the one that's been offline for the longest, so the one with the oldest offline date. You can also, again, ask support through our support ticket. So just by coming up in here, going to help an FAQ, you can raise a ticket and ask for support to remove your duplicates for you. So they will produce a report. They'll move them all into a single zone for you, and then from that zone you can then remove the devices. So they can't remove the devices for you, but they can certainly make it easy by putting them into a zone for you. So I recommend doing that usually every few months, particularly if you have an issue around having duplicates created, just to keep your licensing under control, because we do charge for everything that appears in the console. All right, so that's the end of the questions. So I'll just say thank you to everyone. So hopefully you got something out of it. I know we had some existing customers and other people interested in Cylance on the call, so I'd sort of tailor it to both of you. But thank you for joining. We do have more webinars upcoming, so keep an eye out for those.